Hello, welcome to our in session today. We have over 560 guests from 54 countries, hopefully joining us today for the talk, Designing for Delight. Before I introduce you to our esteemed guests, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items regarding the talk. As you've probably noticed, today's webinar is being recorded. We'll be able to share a link to the recording after the event at some point during the week. We aim to have a very interactive session. That's why we invite you to ask your questions by submitting them through the Q&A button. You can upvote any questions that you find interesting and you want the panelists to answer. We will try to get as many questions as we can during the allocated time. Please use the chat button if you experience any technical difficulties. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Adam, Adrian, and Clara. I'm going to hand you over to Clara, who is going to start today's conversation. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jo. And thank you to the RCA for inviting us to host this wonderful evening. Hello, everyone. I'm Clara.
And I'm Adrian.
Adrian and I met while studying at the Royal College of Art. His background was in magic and engineering, and mine in design. Our shared passion for creativity led us not only to work and invent together ever since, but eventually also to get married. Now we run a design and innovation studio called Special Projects, where we're dedicating to reimagining how we interact with technology, making it feel both human and magical. One of the things that we're deeply fascinated by is how the minds of magicians and of designers often work in a very similar ways, constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Tonight, we are beyond excited to introduce you a guest who embodies this spirit perfectly. He weaves together multiple disciplines to create products that are nothing short of magical. And chances are that every one of you has interacted with his incredible work in one way or another.
Yeah, Adam is an entrepreneur, an inventor, an AI pioneer, and for us, just trying to choose a few things to mention in his bio was quite a big task, and there was a lot of kind of going back and forth. Just to give you some kind of highlights, Adam was co-founded Siri, which he then sold to Apple. He was a founding member and first developer at change.org, which is one of the world's largest petition platforms with more than 500 million members. Adam co-founded Viv Labs, which he sold to Samsung and became part of their voice assistant, Bixby. And now, after the sale of his latest startup, GamePlanner.ai, to Airbnb, Adam works as VP of AI experience there. Also, and I think this one's important to note as well, Adam was chief architect of Kalo, which was the US government's largest funded AI project, and working with technology legend Douglas Engelbart. We'll talk a little bit more about him later if you don't know about him, but really a really kind of fascinating character and kind of legend, really. What makes it even more impressive of all of that is that I first came across Adam watching a magic show where he was performing some really elegant and very clever magic in front of millions of people on TV on Penn and Teller's Fool Us show. I emailed him like nervously straight away, and he got back. And we had a long chat about his favorite magicians and methods for several hours over the weekend. So Adam, it's a huge pleasure to be here talking to you tonight. Good morning to you in San Francisco, in the Airbnb offices, I think where you are now. And thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
Thank you. We thought we'll split the time that we have together in 3 parts. So first, we would like to talk about your experience working in tech with some of the largest companies in the world, and also find out what led you to develop Siri. Then we would love to go into magic and understand how it has influenced your work and how some of the designers and the entrepreneurs that are listening tonight or this morning can learn how to bring magic and delight to their creations. And finally, we would like to talk about AI with you. With so many recent developments happening in AI and user experience, we'd love to talk about what you see coming in the future. For everyone joining us online, we'd love to hear your thoughts and your questions. So we'll keep some time at the end to relay all the questions and queries that you might have for Adam. So feel free to pop them in the Q&A section of Zoom.
Great. Okay, so first of all, Adam, I was wondering if we could talk a bit about Siri, because it's one of your most famous products. And I can still remember how it felt the first time I ever tried it. Could you give us a little bit of background about how Siri came to be?
Sure. So most people know Siri from the version of Siri embedded in Apple's iPhone. Not everyone knows that Siri was a startup before that Apple acquired to build this voice assistant product. And if you look at the short story of it, it seems really easy. We're a small team in San Jose, California. We launched a free app in the App Store. 2 weeks later, Steve Jobs calls our office unannounced. He's like, "Hey, it's Steve. What you doing? Want to come over to my house tomorrow?" We're like, "What? Steve Jobs is calling us?" And that's even more impressive, a feat, because many people don't know one of the meanings of Siri is secret in Swahili. And we were a stealth company. I always like to start our companies quietly with a lot of secrecy. We had our logo of Siri was this ninja, and we had the slogan, "Stay low, move fast." It's kind of kitschy, but when you're a startup, you need culture to bring people together, to believe, to feel different, to feel together. So we launch an app. Steve calls us. We're like, "How did he get this number? There's no website. There's no sign on the door." And he's calling us. We go to his house. We talk about the future. He says, "Boy, I'd like to buy your company." And we said, "Thank you. We're flattered, not interested, goodbye," and we left. And then he called us 30 days in a row, persistently, and managed to convince us we could change the world more with Apple than without. So we ended up joining Apple. So short story, launch an app. 2 weeks later, Steve calls. A month later, you're working at Apple. Sounds easy. But what many people don't know is that the first version of Siri was in 1993, the year before I saw a web browser for the first time. My first web browser was Mosaic in middle of 94. And this is important to understand what Siri was about. Originally, at that time in 93, everyone had a Windows-based mouse PC sitting on their desk. You had to load it up with software, and you would compute only using the software on your computer. I said, someday there will be content and services around the world, and we'll need an interface to interact and discover all the services out there. And my conception was everyone would have an assistant, and you could say, "I want to know this and do that." The assistant would understand, talk to the services around the world, and help you get the job done. So it took many, many years, 17 years, from first prototype to actually launch on the Apple phones. So it's a project of persistence and love and iteration and creation.
Great. I think we're going to talk a little bit more later about some of the sort of like magical magician's methods that you used when you were working on Siri. But it would be really interesting to know a little bit more about Steve, your interactions with Steve Jobs as a leader.
Yeah, we were wondering, you mentioned culture and startup and how important is having a culture in a startup. We had a similar question around Steve Jobs. So it would be very fascinating to get some insight into what it was like to work with Steve Jobs at that time, and what was about his leadership style or the culture he created that fostered so many beautiful, magical things to happen.
Yeah. So let me give you I'll give you two main points that for me define Steve Jobs and his leadership style. The very first day when we went over to his house, he asked me, and he's trying to be really sweet talking and charming because he wants to buy our company. But we get into a discussion. He asked me a question, "Adam, should Apple buy this company?" X, and I won't name which company. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. He's like, what? Why? And we started going at it. Just passionate discussion and debate. And at the end, he said, interesting. I'll think about it. Thank you. And one defining characteristic is that many accomplished people feel that they're the smartest person in the room. They're sort of set in their ways and decisions. Steve wanted to get it right more than to be right, if you understand what I'm saying. Anytime someone had a contrarian opinion, that was interesting to him. And he wanted to learn and push on that. Now, if you couldn't back up your position with data and logic, he would knock you aside. Like, don't waste my time. We have to get it right. But he wanted to get it right rather than be right. And so when we had debates, and we had many, sometimes it would go my way. Sometimes he'd say, Adam, I've heard you. I've thought about it. We're not going to do it your way this time. Here's why. And I love the process and never had a problem working with Steve from that. He was the decision maker, but he was always open and in fact seeking to change his mind, because he was always questioning whether his opinion was the right one. Maybe there's a better way. And so I love that. The second thing I'll call out about Steve is that the culture at Apple, it was very hierarchical, but iterative. So every Monday was demo day throughout the entire company. So if you're working on a project, you're going to go to your manager and show him the demo every time. And as the manager will give you feedback and you make changes. When the manager's happy, he or she would then get it on the calendar of his or her manager. And now they're seeing it. And eventually you're on the calendar of Steve Jobs, right? And so in that way, everything boils up. Steve looks at it, and everything that he said was written down and came down. He would say, this is too complicated. Strategically, we shouldn't be doing this. And this pixel is the wrong shade of blue, right? And this would come down like a ton of bricks. Whoever the manager who let the wrong shade of blue pixel come up, believe me, the next time he or she was going to be checking the pixel colors, et cetera. And so in this way of constant up, down, the entire company started to learn the principles of Steve Jobs. It's got to be simple. It's got to be, is this the most important thing? Is this right for our user? Are you paying attention to the details? And that iterative refinement and obsession for detail, I think that was incredible. And people say that Steve Jobs' greatest invention was Apple itself. I think it comes down to the culture and the processes that he instilled there.
Oh, that's really fascinating. I think speaking of demos, when we last spoke, we talked about like a really like the most famous kind of tech demo, I guess, in history, which was the mother of all demos. And I'm aware that some of our audience will know all about this, and some may have never seen it. So I'm wondering, Joe, if you could maybe play the video while we talk about it. But I was wondering, Adam, if you could just give our audience a bit of context about what this demo is and what it meant at the time, and the impact that that's had on our lives.
Sure. So this is Doug Engelbart, 1968, December 9th, 1968, showing to the National Computer Science audience in a theater an absolute revolution in computer-human interaction. Now, this is at a time when everyone used punch cards, but he now showed interactive terminals with text editors, as you saw recently, a mouse that you could point to different characters or words. He could do shared screen teleconferencing, sort of like Zoom, and multimedia, you see, is showing up in these pictures. So he had basically everything that we know of as personal computing, the mouse, Windows, text editors, emails, he created. Everything we know of the web, hyperlinks, shared, distributed documents with version control and links. And then everything we know of collaboration, including real-time document editing, He could fade the face. You saw that his face was faded behind the text that he was working with. And when you would work with another person, you would both be working on the same document, passing control back and forth in real time, and you would see the face of the person you were working with wirelessly in 1968, 4K of RAM. I don't think we could reproduce what was done there. And the last thing that I'll say about it is all of this was meant to augment humans' capability to think better and solve big problems. And, you know, everyone thinks of Doug as inventing the mouse and everything else, but there was a reason behind what he was doing. He said, someday the world is going to be faced with global, urgent, complex issues. And unless we get better at working together to solve these problems, we will not survive. And he listed them, you know, climate change, hunger, poverty, water, pollution, human rights, animal rights, wars. And we're seeing a lot of those come today, pandemics.
And where do you think we are on that Douglas Engelbart success scale? I mean, because maybe like change.org, I guess, is in a way, you know, kind of connected to giving people a voice, but maybe we were going to talk about AI a bit later, but maybe in relation to where we are now with generative AI and various different types of artificial intelligences. How do you think Douglas Engelbart would be happy, worried, or how would you be feeling?
Doug was never happy. I mean, he was happy, but entrepreneurs are never satisfied is really the best way to say it. I took him out to his birthday just a few months before he died. And in some ways, you could say he is the most accomplished entrepreneur ever. He created everything we use on the personal computer, everything we use on the web, everything we use for human collaboration. Just about. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little, but not much. He won the highest presidential honor, prizes, etc. And yet, despite the fact that now everyone had computers on their desktop, everyone had text editors and email systems and web systems and new technology, AI, which existed, by the way, back in the 60s, now everyone has AI of incredible capabilities and capacities. I think he would still say, as he did when I took him out to lunch, that despite all of this advance in technology, we are still no better at coping with the big problems, working together to think through the big problems. So are we better in technology? Yes. But have we advanced on the Doug Engelbart scale of what he was setting out to do? I think he would be very worried. And so that, to me, brings urgency to all the designers and developers out there that you now have far more tools, believe me, far more tools than he ever did back in 1968, but we have less time. And we need to find methods and ways to work together to solve these problems.
Yes, that's wonderful. Wonderful to hear. A great call to action. Just before we move to magic, I wanted to ask you a question. As we have mentioned, two legendary men in the tech industry. Are there any female leaders or inventors or designers that you feel impacted the way we interact with technology? And how has diversity or lack of diversity in tech leadership impacted innovation and user experience design?
Yes, thank you. So obviously, diversity is a good thing, and we need more of it. And great ideas come from everywhere. I'll call out a few people who have impacted my work in various ways. So Irene Grief was one of the creators of computer-supported cooperative work, or CSCW. That's all about what I was just talking about, trying to help humanity work together, solve problems, share knowledge. This is important foundational work and one of the most important things that we can do. I never got to work with her. She was at IBM and Lotus and, a little bit before my time. But for me, she's one of the legends who is really impacting, life today. And we need more of that kind of thinking going forward. A few people who I worked peripherally with, I'll cite Victoria Bellotti, who was at Xerox PARC. She was one of the people working on the Kalo PAL giant government AI project. Her work was on personal information management and task management. And what I loved about her approach to design was that she took a very almost ethnographic approach. She would study people in situations and watch how they did things and really design not from an ivory tower, but going and working with people and understanding how they do their work and where their problems are. And Joy Mountford, who, so I spent a little bit of time. She ran at Apple, which is one of the best design companies in the world. She ran the HI, Human Interface Group, for, 10, 15 years. She's, known for QuickTime and a lot of foundational work that's really important. And then I'll call out another incredible company for design, which is Airbnb. I think Airbnb is approaching, they have one of the best, if not the best, design teams in the world. Tay O'Connor is the head of all design at Airbnb. She's incredible. I get to work with many female, if they're not legends now, I'm sure they will be in the coming years, like designers such as Rachel Bean, Ali Dreyer, Hina Ko, and many, many more. These are just the ones I get to work with on a daily basis. So, yeah.
And thank you. I think maybe just as the last question before we move on to the magic, kind of tracing. I know you weren't involved in the Mother of All Demos video, but just tracing your journey and maybe with that in mind as well. I think what's amazing with that demo compared to a magic trick and a magician is that it's all real. Like, I guess it feels like it must have felt like a magic trick in 1968 to watch it. But it wasn't. It was all real. And I was just wondering how you think the general approach to innovation in these organizations that you've been involved in, maybe right up till now, Airbnb, has that changed? How has that evolved with regards to these kind of really fantastic kind of demonstrations of user experiences that were really, game changing?
Yeah, it's interesting. So you're right. It was such an unbelievable step forward and so futuristic when Doug presented his work. Because remember, as I said, everyone else was programming computers with punch cards. It was so revolutionary, half the audience thought it was a hoax. Talk about a magic show, right? They didn't think it was real. It seemed like science fiction. And the other half saw it and had their lives changed. Alan Kay was in the audience, one of the greatest designers, et cetera. Many, many people had their lives changed from this demo. So it will forever be known as the mother of all demos. So how has approach to innovation changed? In many ways, not at all, right? Innovation comes from a person who is curious about something and is pursuing it. When I think of Doug, what was his greatest strength? It wasn't in leading huge teams. It's certainly not in marketing. No one's ever heard of Doug Engelbart, and yet he created everything, like worst marketeer ever. But he had a vision, and I always think of him doing this. He would point, and this was the metaphor he would use. His job was to point the way, and people would follow behind, more or less accurately. So he inspired so many people, generations of people like myself. And you're right, Change.org did have Doug Engelbart influences, right? So he was pointing to a future where hundreds of millions of people would come together and share knowledge and take action in the world. Change.org is like that, kind of, right? It wasn't, he would point here and others would go that way and this way and interpret it in their own way. Today, the idea of doing an incredible demo and a polished and magical demo, I think, has gone to a new level in some ways. Steve Jobs, when he presented, it wasn't like a technology bits and bytes and here's how many gigabytes. It was a magic show. He made you feel. And even today, like at Airbnb, there was a launch last May where Brian Chesky, the CEO, got up, and it was a magic show. There was a floating house attached to balloons as part of his technology reveal. So in some ways, I'd say the presentation has become more magical and polished, and the marketing is better. But innovation hasn't changed much. It comes from visionaries who believe and find a way to communicate their ideas, to lead teams towards that vision, either directly or indirectly.
Thanks, Adam. So maybe like moving on now to magic. Can you tell us a little bit about how you became involved in magic as a sort of conjurer? I know that you're kind of doing magic in your work, but how did you kind of originally kind of get into magic, and how's that relationship with magic evolved to now?
Sure, thank you. So I think like many young boys around 10, that's like they're very susceptible age to get into magic. I grew up in a small town, no stoplights. I was only allowed 1 hour of TV a week. So for me, reading magic books and writing away for catalogs and magazines, I would read about literally real life superheroes. I mean, people could fly across the stage or vanish in a split second for real, like in the real world, not just in some imaginary world. So I was very into it from 10 to 14. Then, you kind of reach puberty or whatever and leave it behind. It's not cool anymore. I did no magic for 35 years until my son came of age, so to speak, in that young teen age. He discovered many of my tricks, and it was something we could share together. Anything, I'm not into video games, and his music was different. So anything we can have a passion together is like gold when you're trying to connect with a teenage son. So that's what reignited me back in 2015. I did do one magic trick in that 35-year span. When I proposed to my wife, I got on my knee, I held up my hand, a ring floated up out of my hand right in front of her. I could put my hands all around it. She could put her hands all around it. I asked her to marry me, and I plucked it out of the air and put it on her finger. So that was my own invention, just to make her moment special, right? Even more special than me asking. So yeah, and once I've gotten back in 2015 with my son, I'm very passionate. I believe passion and curiosity is the most important thing for an entrepreneur and a designer and just anyone who lives life. It's such a short time we're here. And so I've gone very deep since then into magic, just the joy of magic, not the performing necessarily, but the creation, the invention, the people, the desire, the emotions, all of that is so colorful. It's such a colorful, interesting, creative field.
Yeah. I'm, as you know, also a huge kind of magic nerd, and I promised Clara I would try and stick to. We can't reveal anything because we get kicked out of the magic circle and things like that. But I do want to ask you offline later about more about your setup for the floating ring. But I think that what's really interesting with magic and the type of work that you do and that we do in this sort of user experience kind of area is that quite often magicians have some form of technology, and that needs to remain completely secret, sort of behind the curtain as such. And then in parallel, they have to focus on an experience that happens in front of the curtain. Sometimes those two things are connected, and sometimes it makes sense to completely, keep them as far apart as possible. So in many ways, conjurers' minds are sort of primed in a way to kind of hold these two things as separate, because quite often there's this assumption that when you have really advanced technology, it will just be amazing and you don't need to do anything. But that's not always the case. Like a lot more work needs to go in to think about how it's going to be experienced. And in the past, when we've spoken, you've talked about some magic methods that you've used, or magicians kind of methods maybe when designing Siri or other projects. I was wondering if you could give us some examples that kind of connect your background in magic to your way of thinking when creating these things.
Yeah, so there's an important quote, I'm sure you've heard it a million times, by Maya Angelou. It's not what, they'll never remember what you said, they won't even remember what you did, but they'll never forget how you make them feel, something like that. And that's really important in our products and our presentations and, you know, anything that we're doing. It's how you make them feel. And obviously, both in products and in magic shows, you can have the most impossible miracle happen and be left completely cold and bored.
Yeah.
Or you can have the most minor miracle happen and be blown away, feeling like your whole world has tilted, both from a magic trick or technology. You can invest billions of dollars into a technology, but if it doesn't connect and make the user feel, it's a waste of money, right? So that's one important lesson. Now, obviously, when we were designing Siri, we were trying to capture some of the utility. I mean, Siri was largely about getting things done, right? What's the weather? Set a timer, get me the sports score, send a message, etc. But in doing that, and especially because we had this little anthropomorphic, you know, chat going, I'm speaking to Siri, Siri can speak back to me, that allows us to connect in interesting ways. And so when we designed the product, we had to first imagine who is Siri and what's the backstory. Is Siri a man or a woman? Is it a machine or a, you know, an AI or a human? What's the relationship to Apple? Is she an employee of Apple or he an employee of Apple? Is Siri a fan? Is it a what? All of this needed to be designed to have a consistent backstory. And once we had that, we went through the whole product and sprinkled in what we call delight nuggets, right? What does that mean? And that should be something you guys, when designing products, do as well. If someone said, what's the weather? Well, the standard response is it's going to be rainy and, you know, this many degrees. A delight nugget would say, and don't forget your glasses, right? It goes one step further, puts a little smile on your face, makes a little bit more than you asked, and in kind of an unexpected way. And I would argue those delight nuggets we kind of sprinkled in to the product were a huge part of why Siri became so popular. And if you think about it, Apple's 6 months from Siri launch, the next 2 quarters were the greatest quarters in technology history at the time. Every profit record, profit margin record was broken, literally selling iPhone 4S. It was the iPhone 4 with Siri, pretty much the same phone, and Apple's stock price doubled, market cap increased, and Apple passed Exxon to become the most valuable company in the history of the world. Would that have happened without a little magic sprinkling of delight nuggets? I'm not sure, right? So getting it right can change the world, can change business, can really have impact.
That's really interesting because I think you know, it's sort of like magical kind of fairy dust, isn't it? Like I think like one of the things that we find sometimes with some clients is that they kind of need convincing about the benefits of going that extra step. You know, the more kind of unquantifiable aspects like empathy and well-being and delight. And that's a really good example with the Apple kind of share price. But I was wondering, you know, how else might you articulate the sort of tangible and intangible benefits of making something magical?
I mean, people connect more, and if they do, the engagement's better, they'll spend more time with it. It's really hard to get people to change their habits, and it's hard to even get them to try it once, right? So you have to design to have a positive first experience, And then if you can go further, if you can surprise and delight, now they may come back with this second time, and they may anticipate and look forward to their second time. And if you do this enough times, now it starts to become a habit. They start to think, oh, I wonder what Siri would say. I wonder if Siri could do this for me easier. Because before Siri came along, or any product, they had other ways of getting that done. It's hard to move that piece. So I do think you can't overemphasize that initial experience and this repeat delight that keeps bringing them back until a habit is formed. One other thing that I'll mention that I've used, I've started 5 startups now. They've all been pretty successful. Every startup begins with trying to raise money. Raising money begins with a magical demonstration. And I now have a formula of sorts for what is the perfect magical demonstration. And it has 3 steps. I'm sharing secrets. I hope there's no one listening right now. But number 1, you need for the product that you show to get whoever's listening, the venture capitalist, the customer, whatever, to kind of like try it on in their mind and say, yes, I want that functionality. Step 2 is there has to be a stimulus moment. So first you get them nodding. And then, whoa, what was that? And their nerves jangle, their neurons are firing. There's a stimulus moment. And the first version of Siri, which I did 31 years ago, you'd be showing them, oh, you can automate, your calendar's on this machine, and this is here, and you can control all of your systems easily from a handheld device. They're like, yeah, that's good. Oh, that's cool. I could use that. That would save me time. And then all of a sudden, the phone rang. And back then it was like this, the desktop phones that had bell, like ring, like really loud. Everyone jumped. And you could see everyone turns their attention. We're in a conference room, the phone's ringing. You answer the phone on speakerphone and you hear a computer voice saying, Adam Cheyer, there's an important message that arrived for you. Everyone is like, no way. And the ringing of the phone that made everyone jump out of their seat was the stimulus moment. So they're like nodding, they're nodding, and then, whoa, shock. And it's visceral. And then for a VC presentation, when their nerves are still jangling, now you hit them with the tech story. Oh, let me explain how it works. We've got this neural network-based active ontologies that are, and everyone's like, whoa, okay, cool. I want it, boom, stimulus, and there's tech. And you put those 3 for a technology startup demonstration. For me, that's a formula that's just so powerful, and it's really driven from a magic show. You've got to have these crests of emotion, these feelings at different points, and you need to script them in order, right, so that it flows and it has the right effect. So that's a magical method that I found very useful in presenting to people. And I might add, Steve Jobs understood magical presentation extremely well. One story I like to tell, when he did the iPod Nano, he was introducing it. He didn't say, here's how many gigabytes and this and that. He came out on stage wearing jeans and his turtleneck shirt. He said, the iPod has always been about being 1,000 songs in your pocket. Pause. Well, have you ever wondered what that little pocket at the top of your pocket is for? And everyone goes, no way. Pause. And then he takes out the iPod Nano from the little change pocket, or that little top of the jeans pocket, and goes, now we know. And I'm like, that was a magician's presentation. Could that card over on the other side of your table be your card? No way. Like, you just get their heart racing, then you hit them with the finish. Understanding magician presentation techniques, I think, is very important for product marketing.
Thank you, Adam. Do you want to ask the next
Yes,
thing?
I think we need to move towards the future. But this is great. Thank you for sharing your magic methodology, your secret potion with us. Just in the interest of time, I know we have quite a lot of questions coming through. I want to just talk quickly about AI before we move on to the audience's question. So you are currently VP of Experience at Airbnb. VP of AI Experience at Airbnb. Without spilling the secrets, can you give us a hint of what of the future of AI experiences that might look like at Airbnb or in general?
Sure. So let me say just a few words about why I came to Airbnb. We were not looking to sell our little startup. It was still completely secret and stealth mode, like how I start most of my companies. And I didn't really know anything about Airbnb. I mean, I knew the product, of course, but I didn't know the CEO, the founder, the culture, anything. When I first met Brian Chesky, the question I asked him is, well, what do you want to do with AI anyway? And I was expecting him to say, oh, I want to use it to optimize our algorithms to sell more product. But he said, I want to use AI to connect people in the real world. I was like, what? What does that mean? He says, I want to use AI to cure loneliness. It was so unexpected. And he started weaving his vision that I describe as having big ambition and strong values. He wanted to be the most humanistic company. He wants to connect people and build trust, and spoke about how everything Airbnb is built on is about trust and connection. I mean, letting a stranger come live in your house with you, like, sounds like a stupid idea. It requires an enormous amount of trust. And yet it's, whatever it is, a $90 billion business or something like that today. So what am I doing at Airbnb and what am I working on? It is about trying to leverage the power of AI. It's an extraordinary technology beyond any of my expectations. After working 38 years professionally in AI, I never thought I would see this. So we're trying to leverage this amazing time, but do it in a way that, taught to us by Doug Engelbart, it's not just about the technology, AI, it's also about the human side, CI, what he coined as collective intelligence and knowledge sharing. And so how do people and AI work together to make better decisions of all sorts? That's what interests me. And maybe you'll see a little bit of those ideas start to flow through Airbnb's products in the coming times.
Nice, exciting. And how do you feel about the future of AI? How optimistic are you or pessimistic are you about AI? And do you have any examples to share of AI being used positively?
Sure. So every technology comes with its pros and cons. Everything that moves forward, the automobile, replacing horse and buggies, it's an incredible technology. So much better. It enables change in the world, but it also brings its negatives, right? Pollution and fatalities and, et cetera. So AI is no different. There are some real things, concerns that the world needs to think about carefully. But overall, I'm very optimistic about the power of this technology. I literally say AI, this generation of AI and its successors, will be the most important tool humanity has ever created. And there are examples. So, for instance, whenever a new technology comes, I say, does this new thing, whether it's blockchain or quantum computing or whatever it is, does this enable us to do something that we could not do before? And with quantum computing and blockchain, I don't think the answer is yes yet. But with AI, there are already multiple math problems, 50-year unsolved math problems with very practical implications that have been solved thanks to AI. Would we have gotten there without it? Maybe eventually, but not now. Take protein folding, which is so important for drug development. Before AI, we had 100,000 known proteins. Today, thanks to AI, it's basically a solved problem to predict the shape of how proteins will fold for binding. We have 200 million known protein shapes. 200 million compared to 100,000. So AI is helping bring new knowledge to us to solve all sorts of problems. And when you look at all of these complex issues that we need to face, cancer and other disease, hunger, poverty, all of these things, I think AI can help solve all of these existential risks. That said, it won't solve it for us. It's a tool. We have to solve it, but this brings new knowledge and capabilities to empower us to do so.
Thank you, Adam. Bringing it back to the RCA, that, as you know, is an art and design university. How do you think that AI will change the way we approach design and creativity in the coming years?
Oh boy, a few years ago, I would have said, humans are creative, computers can't be. Well, now they can be. Literally, no longer is AI just winning chess competitions and calculation competitions. And again, you could argue chess is a creative field, an inventive field, but it's now starting to win creativity competitions, right? So it's clear that all of our jobs will change a little bit. There will be new tools to help augment our capabilities to create new products, to create new software. I'm a software engineer. I'm telling you, the way we write software today is dramatically different than it was 2 years ago because AI is helping every step of the way. However, people say, will this replace humans? Some jobs, like toll booth operators, there are some jobs that will go away, but most jobs will be enhanced by AI, and it's still the spark. I really believe in the specialness and the spark of humans in terms of creativity, invention, entrepreneurship. So I see AI as a tool, but our jobs will change for sure.
Wonderful. Thank you, Adam. While we pick some questions from you from the audience, could you recommend one book and one film that has inspired you? And if I look distracted, I'm just looking at the questions.
Sure. I'll call out a book. For the book, there's a book by Yancey Strickler called This Could Be Our Future, A Manifesto for a Better World. And it's a really interesting read that postulates that money and shareholder value should not be the only metric for the companies that we create, and that you can actually design a more sort of a mixed modality that, a different metric that tries to balance not only shareholder value, but with positive impact in the world. So I just think it's a great reminder that the choices we make in designing our structures and our processes really do shape the world in unanticipated ways, and we should be very intentional about it. So I encourage everyone to read that. For the movie, I'm not a huge movie buff, but I'll call out Her and tell a quick anecdote. So I got to tell this to Spike Jonze, the director of the movie. When I was watching Her, of course, as an engineer behind Siri, every word that came out of the AI assistant's mouth, I'm reverse engineering. I'm trying to figure out, okay, I see what's happening. Okay, I need to make Siri smarter by doing this. And then there was one moment, and it was distracting. It was like, when you watch a magic trick, Adrian, your mind is like, oh, how is this working? Oh, is there a move here? Maybe he's got this. It's like this voice grinding away. I had that exact same experience watching the movie Her until at one point, the AI assistant says, Joaquin Phoenix says, I'm going to go to sleep now. And she says, can I watch you sleep? And it was like my brain went overload. I'm like, there's no logical or rational reason to observe another human prone while they sleep. The only explanation is something with emotion or love. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. And it's like that little engineering bubble popped, and then I could enjoy the rest of the movie. So that was just a very funny moment for me watching that film.
I love that. I think there should be like a documentary or a film about the inventor of Siri watching her. I think that's a really nice story. Okay, so we've got loads of questions. I'm hoping we can get through a few. So thanks everyone for sending them through. I have to come a little bit closer to read this. So this one's from Matthew Cockrell. Hi Matthew, and Maliki as well. Nice to hear from you guys. So we know each other. So I'm going to read it out. So it says, it took 40 years for Douglas and his team's vision to move to a ubiquitous solution we use without thinking today. Does Adam think vision to reality can be delivered faster these days with the advancements in transformer models powering AI?
So I'll answer that by saying I have not a law, but an observation that I call the 10 plus theory. And so the way it works, if you think of the first mass scale human interface revolution, it was really 1984 with the mouse and Windows, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. 1984 was a big year in human interface design. 10 plus 1 years later, 95, a new paradigm emerged. It was the web and hyperlinks. 10 plus 2 years later, there was a breakthrough in mobile technology, the iPhone, 2007. And the following year was the App Store, 2008. So I've been saying for probably 15 years that in 10 plus 3 years after 2008, so 2021, there would be the next major revolution of human interface, and I called it the conversational assistant. You can go back and watch me talk about this 10, 12 years ago. Right on schedule, the ChatGPT moment, right around 2021, boom, it goes. So my next prediction, 10 plus 4 years later, so in 2035 will be the next major mass scale interface change. And my prediction is it will be augmented reality. So I think it'll take 14 years for the batteries and the form factors and the use cases, and everything needs to get small enough, either in contact lenses or actual glasses people would wear, has to have all-day battery life. There's so much to solve. So my prediction is for this next, 12, 14 years, we'll continue to iterate on AI, just like we iterated on the web, just like we iterated on mobile apps. It'll take us that long to really figure out how to use AI. If you look at enterprises today, very few are getting big benefit yet, but just wait a few years, we'll figure it out. But you can see 10 plus 1, 10 plus 2, 10 plus 3, 10 plus 4, it's actually slowing down the adoption, not accelerating. Everyone thinks, oh, it's so fast. Yeah, it is in a micro local way, but not in a global, more phased way.
Okay, I'm going to write that down and place a bet and get back to you in 2034. So I've got kind of two questions I'm combining into one because they kind of fit with what we've been talking about. So this is from Ben Allen Jones, also a friend. Hi, Ben. And also Jude Pullen, I think, is also watching. So Jude sent this earlier. So Ben just wants to know, is there a reason you say computer-human interaction versus human-computer interaction? I'm interested in your priority. And then I'm going to just add Jude's question to this because I think it's all kind of linked. Jude wrote, do you feel the future of AI is to become more humanistic, like the Turing test, or for us as humans to become more hybrid in our cognition?
Yeah, sorry, Adam, to chip in. I really feel personally about this one because of my accent, Siri and other voice recognition have some trouble understanding what I say. So I had to become less human when I speak to, I become more hybrid when I speak to a device so that it can understand me.
Yeah. So I would say I don't think it's a huge intention on the first part of the question between computer-human interaction and human-computer interaction. I think the way, if I said it that way, it makes me smile. Back in 1999, with my co-creator Luke Julia, we created a center at SRI called the Computer Human Interaction Center. Now, he was French, and we obviously picked those words because it's spelled chic, which is a nice French word. So I would guess that the reason I might have said computer-human interaction kind of dates back to we were the Computer Human Interaction Center because it sounded nicer in a word. HCIC is much harder to say. So no specific priority. Obviously, I think humans are and should be in charge. I put huge benefit on collaborating with each other, a la Doug Engelbart, as much as collaborating with a machine. So that's that. In terms of how will humans evolve to use technology, in a sense, do you need to adapt to Siri by changing your voice? It's everything adapts together, right? I'm sure the way we drive cars, it takes, if you change the steering wheel, we'd have to adapt tremendously. Every technology change makes humans adapt to come closer to it. And this is technology that as humans change, the AI can actually come closer. So I would say it's a bit more of a synergistic evolution. We see it already. I mean, I think the way the skills and talents and weaknesses of this younger generation, I think is somewhat influenced by the social media, the phones, the way they consume and process information is different than when I was growing up in a slow, sleepy town with no stoplights and had to, every month I would get a magic magazine and that was my highlight for the month, right? A different pace and time. Mm-hmm. So yes, I think people evolve with technology.
Wonderful.
We have
one last question.
One last question, I think. We got time, if that's all right, we've got time for one last question. So Priya Prakash sent this question. So what's the difference between an entrepreneur and an inventor from your experience, Adam? Especially as you give Engelbart's example, do you need a large tech company to distribute or scale one's product designs?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Priya. So for me, an entrepreneur and inventor are very different. And I, in many ways, value the entrepreneur more. An inventor is someone who gets a brilliant idea and creates an invention, solves a problem, maybe even files a patent on it, but doesn't necessarily take it to market. I think an entrepreneur has this unique combination of ambition, meaning you want to impact the world, you want to get your idea out there. It's not enough just to invent it and put it into a patent shelf or something. It's about getting this business, getting this idea out to impact people. But you have so you've got ambition, but a very focused amount of time. And there's this whole game about when you raise money, that gives you time, you're spending money, you're going to run out, you have to produce value in that limited amount of time or you die. And if you succeed and you produce value, then you can raise more money to get to the next step and eventually you are profitable or you exit somehow. So for me, invention is at the core and it's important. It is important. But an entrepreneur has to be more than an inventor because it's about not only thinking of an idea, it's taking an idea out to market. And that's a really hard and tricky thing. So I give more weight to the entrepreneur aspect.
Thanks, Adam. Well, then,
yes.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, please go.
I was just going to add one piece. If you think about it, an entrepreneur, every great idea and every big company started as a small company. So I actually think innovation is better done as an entrepreneur, where you can take these crazy ambitious risks. 9 out of 10 fail, but the ones that succeed can be really ambitious, really amazing. It's harder to do that in a big company. So I think A startup is the greatest change engine in the world.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks so much for your time this evening and this morning for you. And it's been really fascinating just to hear your history and also just see that thread of magic kind of woven through everything that you've been involved in. Before we wrap up, is there anything that we should have asked that maybe we didn't ask that you wanted us to ask or you think that we missed?
No, this was so much fun. I'm so happy we touched on magic and design and AI and CI, collective intelligence, with sort of Doug Engelbart. I guess the one thing that I would close with or send as a reminder to your entrepreneurs and designers, number one, Y Combinator is famous for saying, make something people want. I think that's really, really important. Maybe we add to it, make something that makes people feel, that people resonate with, right? That's kind of sprinkling in a little bit of emotion and surprise and delight in this way. So yeah, and I would say go solve some of these big urgent problems we're going to be faced soon because time is running out.
Great words.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks so much. And also just wanted to say a massive thank you to Joe and the team at the RCA for inviting us and here to talk and make this happen. So thank you so much. And I think that's it.
Yay. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Adam, Clara, and Adrian. It was an incredible talk. I would also like to thank everyone who joined us for this conversation, and I would like to thank you for sharing your insights and expertise. As I said earlier, we will share a link to the recording of the session with everyone after the event, hopefully by tomorrow on our website. I have one thing to plug. Clara and Adrian will be co-convening an executive education masterclass in November, design thinking and innovation in practice. So please do book your places if you're interested. Thank you everyone for your time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.